Hello and welcome. You're watching Nothing But the Truth. Is it disrespect to the Constitution to refuse to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai? And is it unacceptable to criticize the nation? Those are two issues I shall raise today with former Congress Minister, now an MP, author and historian, Shashi Tharoor. Shashi Tharoor, the BJP's National Executive has passed a political resolution which says, and I'm quoting, "Our Constitution describes India as Bharat." Also, refusal to chant victory to Bharat tantamounts to disrespect to our Constitution itself. As a congressman and as a historian, do you accept that refusal to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai is disrespect to the Constitution?
Absolutely not. First of all, this is a huge stretch because no one is refusing to say anything about Bharat. It's about Bharat Mata. Bharat Mata is fine for me. It's probably fine for you. Certainly many Hindus and a lot of Muslims have no difficulty with it. But some Muslims have explained patiently that to them it seems the deification of the nation as a Hindu goddess. Bharat Mata, as you know, depicted in Hindutva iconography as a Hindu goddess type figure with 6 arms seated on a lion. And this kind of worship of a goddess figure they find uncomfortable. So they say, tell us to say Jai Hind, tell us to say Hindustan Zindabad, tell us even to say Jai Bharat, we'll do it. But don't ask us to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai. And I think our democracy and our constitution gives them the right to say it and not to say it. And that's what we should respect.
I'll come to the BJP's justification for their argument in a moment's time. But you're saying at the moment that India must accommodate any religious hesitation, which some Muslims may have, to embrace Bharat Mata Ki Jai. It is democratic to accommodate that. It will be undemocratic not to.
That's right. The same constitution that gives us the right to say things, freedom of speech, also gives us the freedom of silence. If we don't want to say something, we can't put words into people's mouths.
Let me now come to the BJP's justification, because the same resolution passed by the National Executive says Bharat Mata Ki Jai is not merely a slogan. It was a mantra of inspiration to countless freedom fighters during the independence struggle. It is the heartbeat of 1 billion people today. In that wider context, is it unacceptable to refuse to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai because you believe you have the freedom not to?
Well, look, unacceptable is a wrong word. I think very clearly any Muslim who didn't feel that this somehow impinged upon his form of worship and his respect for the principle in Islam that one can only bow one's head to Allah and so on, if any Muslim didn't feel that and said it, that obviously is something that many would welcome and on all sides of the political divide. And we've heard Javed Akhtar's rather impressive speech in the Rajya Sabha saying he has no problem with saying it. But there are Muslims for whom it is a problem, and surely part of our respect for their freedom of religion as well as for their constitutional rights is to allow them not to say it. I don't think nationalism can be linked to forcing someone to mouth a particular expression that they don't actually believe in.
Let me clarify. Are you therefore saying that every Indian citizen has a right to refuse to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai? It is an incontestable right.
My dear Karan, not only is it an incontestable right, if you look at something as sacrosanct as the national anthem, where there is very much less leeway than on something like Bharat Mata Ki Jai, there is a Supreme Court ruling in the Jehovah's Witnesses case that merely standing up in respect but refusing to sing it is acceptable, is legal, is constitutionally permitted. So if people can refuse to sing the national anthem, of course they can refuse to shout any particular slogan, from Bharat Mata Ki Jai to Vande Mataram to even Jai Hind. I was remarking that Jai Hind has become almost just a friendly greeting with many of our uniformed personnel. But you don't have to say it.
It is in fact the accepted army greeting. Yeah. Army officers and soldiers greet each other with Jai Hind, not with Namaste. Jai Hind.
Exactly.
Let me put this to you. Last Monday, Pratap Bhanu Mehta went one step further. He said for any political system to force or coerce people into saying Bharat Mata Ki Jai would be objectionable. Would you agree to that?
I do, and I have objected. I think it's wrong. I'm even prepared to concede the BJP's other argument that Mr. Owaisi, my good friend Asaduddin Owaisi was saying this out of a very calculated political messaging to a certain section of the electorate that he wanted to support.
But he has a right to do that.
He has a right to do that, and political opportunism doesn't vitiate the principle. The principle remains that he has the right not to say something, and we should not be forcing him. There is no acid test or litmus test for Indian nationalism.
Just to sum up, your position therefore is that every Indian as a citizen has a right to refuse to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai, and secondly, you agree with Pratap Bhanu Mehta that for a political system to force or coerce people into saying Bharat Mata Ki Jai is objectionable.
Correct.
Now, the BJP actually in their resolution goes one step further. They try and suggest primacy for this slogan. Do you believe Bharat Mata Ki Jai has precedence over slogans like Jai Hind, Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara, or even the left favourite Inqilab Zindabad?
No, it doesn't. And in fact, you know, the irony about all of this is there were various slogans used at various times that had tremendous potency in the national movement. I mean, today it seems the BJP only says quit India to those who disagree with it. But there's another slogan that had a lot of resonance. People have to accept that history has thrown up a lot of these expressions. I have no difficulty saying Bharat Mata Ki Jai. In fact, I found myself in a bus at a European airport a few months ago with a whole bunch of Indian pilgrims, and they said, "Sir, lead us in some slogan shouting." And I said, "Bharat Mata Ki Jai," and they all went with it. I have no problem doing that, but I have to respect the right of fellow Indians who don't actually share my reverence for that slogan.
In fact, if you don't respect that right, you're being intolerant of them.
Exactly, and I don't want to be intolerant of anybody in our country.
Now, in the context of everything you've said, I want to put to you what happened in Maharashtra, where a Muslim MLA refused to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai, and the press has widely reported that it was your party's legislature leader, Radha Krishna Vicky Patil, who first moved a motion to have him suspended. Has Mr. Patil A, committed a mistake, and B, in doing so, embarrassed the Congress party?
Well, look, there was no national decision by the Congress party. There was apparently an action in which the Maharashtra legislature party of the Congress was complicit. I've also read a different version of what transpired, in which the deputy leader has apparently said that the resolution was passed by voice vote and the opposition was not consulted. So I don't know the full truth of it. All I can say is I would not have agreed with this. Had I been a Congress MLA in Maharashtra, I would have objected to us taking such a stand. And I do believe that though any legislature is sovereign and can take its own decisions, this was a deplorable step to take.
There may be a certain amount of controversy over the claim that Vicky Patil actually moved that motion for suspension, although some papers have reported that he did. But what is undoubtedly true is that the Congress members of that legislature certainly agreed and voted unanimously, whether by voice vote or whatever.
It was a voice vote, and there's no proof at all that they opened their mouths. I mean, frankly,
but they didn't dissent, and they could have.
When you're in the opposition, yes, you could have. They could have shouted out no, and apparently they didn't. And I think they should have. I think they should have had an opportunity to explain to the nation and to the rest of Maharashtra in this particular case why it was wrong to hold any legislator to an acid test about something that has absolutely no moorings in either constitution or law.
Then has this event, whether it's done by Mr. Vicky Patil himself or whether it's done collectively by all legislators as a whole, has this event embarrassed Congress?
I think it's actually embarrassed our polity, and particularly the kind of climate created by our ruling party, which has been able to intimidate the opposition into going along with a voice vote on this subject. I think let's not now turn the tables on somebody who's gone along with something he didn't actually drive the thrust towards.
Can I interrupt? You said that the government has intimidated the opposition into going along. The corollary to that is that Congress did get intimidated.
Well, look, as I told you, there is a lot of uncertainty about exactly what transpired in Maharashtra. I'm saying if your version is true, then the only explanation is that they were kind of browbeaten into it, that here's something being held out to be a test of nationalism, and they felt they had no choice but to go along. I believe they did have a choice, and they shouldn't have gone along.
I'll tell you why I ask whether this has embarrassed Congress, because everyone remembers not so long ago, just about a month or 6 weeks ago, Rahul Gandhi berated the BJP and Mr. Modi in particular for destroying relationships between individuals and communities in the name of the flag. Now here's the Congress party, whether it's done through its legislative party leader or whether it's done collectively, actually complicit by not dissenting in suspending an MLA who refuses to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai. That must have embarrassed Rahul Gandhi, because either it makes Rahul Gandhi look as if his party doesn't agree with what he said, or there are major differences to the extent to which Rahul Gandhi will actually fulfill what he preaches.
No, Rahul Gandhi, frankly, I agree with Rahul Gandhi on this. I think it's divisive to impose such acid tests. And I don't believe that he has said a word about what he's certainly not given a seal of approval to what happened in Maharashtra.
Nor has he done the opposite.
Well, he's been busy. And the fact is, on this particular...
So busy that he can't point out a contradiction that embarrasses him?
No, this is the contradiction you've all pointed out. And some of us, perhaps because we don't have senior enough responsibilities for our opinion to have any impact on the way in which the party functions. Some of us have made absolutely no bones about the fact that we disagree with this.
And you're saying so admirably clearly in this interview today, but the silence from Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi is equally deafening and noticeable. And after your Maharashtra legislators had not just embarrassed the party by becoming cowed down or by being intimidated, but also by contradicting Rahul Gandhi's speech in Parliament, that silence becomes worrying.
No, look, I can't speak for Rahul Gandhi. He will speak for himself and has been doing so with admirable clarity for quite some time.
Not on this subject,
but
and a whole week and more has gone by.
I've heard him in multiple forums.
Not on this subject.
In the Congress Parliamentary Party, in Parliament.
Not on this subject, forums. I keep interrupting.
No, speaking in favour of differences of view and
but he hasn't admonished his legislators in Maharashtra for embarrassing and contradicting him. That silence is
it's possible worrying. That he grants them the very right to disagree that the ruling party is not willing to grant this poor legislator.
In which case he makes a mockery of the criticism he made of the BJP.
His view is very clear. His own view is that it's wrong what the BJP is doing.
But does his party share it? Does his party share it? Do his party men share it? And if they don't, he's embarrassed. No. And if he can't do anything about it, he looks weak.
There has been no official position taken by the national level party. Karan, this is one state legislature party out of 29 states. Let's not blow it out of proportion.
Let me widen the discussion by pointing this out to you, that on this issue of Bharat Mata Ki Jai, it's now become apparent that your party is literally at sixes and sevens. Your party General Secretary Digvijay Singh has told the Indian Express on the 18th of March that no one should refuse to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai. Virtually at the same time, your party's official spokesman Manish Tiwari tweeted suggesting that there's nothing very special about Bharat Mata Ki Jai, it's just another national slogan. You today have made it crystal clear that every Indian has a right to refuse, and secondly, for a system or a party to insist that you say it is objectionable. So clearly, on this issue of Bharat Mata Ki Jai, Congress is literally all over the place.
Well, that's our democracy at work. We wish the BJP would grant the entire nation, including Mr. Owaisi, the same privilege.
But don't you think this underlines the need for Rahul and Sonia, on an issue that has now acquired so much political salience, to make clear what is the party's position, rather to leave the party looking divided and at odds with each other?
No, look, frankly, we are a party in which, first of all, we're a big tent party. There are a number of views. And the usual principle in a democratic party is, except on those matters in which the party issues a whip or a clear instruction that this is and shall be the party line, we are free to speak our own consciences. And I think if 3 or 4 Congress leaders have expressed their own views, that does not imply a divided party, that implies a democratic party.
To me, it sounds on this critical issue, Congress has chosen to be a Tower of Babel.
Oh, come on, Karan. The fact is there are so many issues on which we have different views. But, for example, had there been a vote in Parliament on the subject and the party taken a particular stand, everyone would have fallen in line. The party is not divided. So
Digvijay Singh would have happily contributed himself under a 3-line whip from Rahul Gandhi?
Well, look, if he's not in Parliament, the question's academic.
He is in Parliament. He's in the Rajya Sabha.
But if it came up in the Rajya Sabha, sorry, I have this typical elected MP's Lok Sabha perspective on Parliament. But I'm saying if he's in the Rajya Sabha and the issue came up there, we would all normally follow the party whip, yes.
All right. Let's come to a second issue of concern. Is it acceptable or is it unacceptable for an Indian citizen to criticize his nation? Let me quote what Mr. Modi said, according to the Hindu newspaper, at the same BJP National Executive. He said his party was accepting of political criticism of itself, but not of the nation. So I ask you, is it unacceptable for an Indian citizen to criticize his nation?
You see, it depends on how you define what criticism of the nation is. I worry a little bit about the BJP's tendency to quickly dismiss as anti-national things which may not be, because there's a conflation in the BJP's mind between the party, which is not the government, and the government, which is not the nation. The nation is something larger than both the party, the ruling party, and the government. The BJP doesn't seem to understand that. Secondly, for me, patriotism is one thing, and as George Orwell in his famous essay on nationalism has explained, nationalism is something else. Patriotism is about love of your own country and of a particular way of life that country enshrines, and you're not thrusting it at anybody else. It's what you feel about your own country. Nationalism is always associated with power, or as Orwell put it, it's power hunger tempered by self-deception. The notion that your nation is always right and is beyond criticism. And this kind of nationalism Tagore wrote against. He talked about how no nation was greater than the ideals of humanity. that political freedom is not freedom if the mind is not free. The mind must be free to criticize. Our democracy has written a constitution that actually gives people the right to think aloud and to explore various issues. For me, for example, I would say that even advocating freedom or independence or secession of Kashmir, which is something I disagree with profoundly, is not anti-national, provided it's done within the framework of the Constitution, without incitement to violence, without support for terrorists and militants. It is constitutional.
But I'm going to interrupt you at this point. You began by making a distinction between the party and the government, and secondly between the government and the nation. And that led me to say that what you were saying, without actually saying it so explicitly, is that criticism of the party, criticism of the government is acceptable, but maybe criticism of the nation is not. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, as I said, it depends on what you define. For example, if somebody says, let us destroy the Indian state, that is anti-national. If somebody says, we'll break up Bharat by force of arms, that is anti-national. But if we say that I believe intellectually that, for example, Kashmir should be allowed to secede, that is legitimate discussion in a constitutional democracy.
But there's a very interesting
But there are
thing
some
here.
people in the BJP who would call that anti-national.
But there's a very interesting point here. If you leave aside the definition of what is nation and what is criticism, because on that different people will quarrel, your position and stand is not that dissimilar to Mr. Modi. Mr. Mr. Modi's exact words were, let me put them to you, he said his party was accepting of political criticism of itself, but not of the nation. And you've just said that there are certain types of criticism of the nation, that I will break up the nation, that my nation be damned, that is unacceptable.
Break up the nation through force. I've always said, in fact, I have a pending private member's bill in Parliament, which was introduced in December, saying that the sedition law should be amended to make legal anything except incitement to violence and the actual commission.
That is actually the position as laid down by the Supreme Court as well. Your bill will clarify it. But what you're saying is that slogans like भारत की बर्बादी तक, कश्मीर की आज़ादी तक, जंग करेंगे और भारत तेरे टुकड़े होंगे इंशाल्लाह इंशाल्लाह, that is unacceptable. That sort of criticism is impermissible.
To my mind, the first slogan is not criticism, it is actually a plan of action to break India by force, and that is anti-national.
The second?
The second one is more debatable, because if it's inshallah, if it is the will of God, India will break up. To my mind, that a lawyer and a court will have to judge, but to my mind,
it all hinges on inshallah.
Yeah,
but
so
that's a borderline case.
But to my mind, India is not so feeble that a bunch of misguided slogans by irresponsible students is going to destroy our democracy or our nation. Whereas violating the ethos of freedom on which our nation is built can actually be far more anti-national than a few slogans.
Let me put to you a point that Pratap Bhanu Mehta made to me in an interview on Monday, and I'm going to quote him. He says, there could be times when nationalism is narrow and pinched up, does not brook serious criticism, is aligned with tyranny, and its purpose is to unleash destructive passion. In those circumstances, he says, and I'm now quoting him, then being anti-national might be an obligation. In other words, not just acceptable, it could be a duty on the part of right-thinking citizens. Would you agree with that?
Well, it depends on that. To my mind, is a very extreme case. That would be, say, Hitler's Germany, where the truly nationalist thing to do was to try and overthrow Hitler.
In the emergency.
Different. Because,
why different?
I'll tell you why. Because whatever Mrs. Gandhi did, and I was a critic of it at the time, and subsequently, and I have the paper trail to prove it, is that Mrs. Gandhi was acting within the framework of the Constitution. She may have.
So was Hitler with the Enabling Act of 1932.
But at the same time, Mrs. Gandhi wasn't setting up concentration camps and liquidating opponents.
She arrested something like 175,000 politicians, students and others.
Many of whom were gradually released over time, over the next 9 to 12 months.
And some spent entire 21 months in jail.
Karan, I'm not defending the emergency. I'm a big critic of the emergency.
All I'm saying is, just as you said, Hitler's rule may have made it permissible to be anti-national in your criticism of what he was doing. Similarly, I'm saying Indira's emergency could be another set of circumstances where it may be permissible to be anti-national or be at least critical of the nation.
Criticism, yes. But say blowing up railway tracks, which one prominent opposition leader did, no. So there is a difference.
Absolutely. But I'm not talking about violence, I'm talking about criticism.
Criticism I've always defended of anything.
So then you do agree that there are certain moments when in fact right-thinking Indians would not just find it acceptable to be critical of the nation, it might be an obligation, or it might at least be the understandable thing to do.
No, but that would not have been the nation. That would have been a criticism of the government of the day and the ruling party that constituted the government. But the nation...
even then the nation mustn't be criticized.
Jayaprakash Narayan's famous statement, India is larger than you are, to the Prime Minister of India.
So then you're very close, by the way, to Mr. Modi. Criticism of the government, of the party, is all acceptable. Criticism of the nation, even during the emergency, is not. You distinguish between the nation and the government.
That's right. I mean, if somebody said that the only cure for the emergency is to wage war on the state of India and break it up into constituent parts, that is an anti-national statement.
Because there you're going towards incitement of violence. But you're actually saying something even more important, which is short of that, which is you have to distinguish between the government and the government's policies, Indira and the emergency on the one hand, to take an Indian example, and the nation on the other. Correct. Criticize the emergency, but not the nation. I
can even go one step further to the nation idea, which is say if Mrs. Gandhi then changed the constitution, made India a dictatorship, for example, and you felt that was something that you had to oppose because you believed in Indian democracy, that could be construed by the government of the day as anti-national, but you would still be justified in doing it. That falls into Pratap Bhanu Mehta's objection. But it never happened. It happened in Hitler's Germany, it happened in Mussolini's Italy, it didn't happen in India.
Absolutely. But the interesting thing, that I'm leaving this as the last thought before I come to my last question and my last issue, is that on this question of criticizing the nation, where you distinguish between criticizing the government, criticizing the party, and criticizing the nation, you're fairly closely in accord with Mr. Modi. And there's no harm in that. I'm not making that a criticism. I'm not going to make it a political point. But you're in accord that you can criticize the government, you can criticize its policies. Criticizing the nation is a different thing.
However, it also depends on how you interpret, what do you shove into the basket of criticism of the nation?
Absolutely.
And my feeling is that this government tends to interpret criticism of itself as criticism of the nation, which I think is not fair.
But that's a whole new issue altogether. Now let me come to my final issue, and it's to do with your comment about Bhagat Singh. I'm going to quote what you said so that the audience actually knows what you said. Your words were, Bhagat Singh was the Kanhaiya Kumar of his time, full stop. That was a casual, one-off, single-sentence comment. It was a throwaway line prompted by a member of the audience who shouted Bhagat Singh's name. Yet despite all of that, you were admonished by someone as senior as Ghulam Nabi Azad, and your party spokesman Manish Tiwari went out of his way to distance the party from you. And my question is simple. Has your party overreacted?
My party is not overreacted. They're obviously reacting to the deliberate exploitation of what everyone in JNU saw as a casual remark by the BJP. You know what the BJP has been doing? They have actually, their Yuva Morcha in Punjab has filed a case against me. They have burned my effigy in half a dozen cities. They've lit bonfires with my picture on it. This is getting to be absurd.
Maybe the BJP has overreacted, but let me quote to you what Ghulam Nabi Azad said.
Can I finish my thought, Karan? The reason Ghulam Nabi ji and Manish said what they said is there are elections looming before too long in Punjab. Bhagat Singh's name was going to come up with Martyrs' Day being commemorated the 23rd of March, and very clearly the BJP was going to exploit this, so the Congress did the right thing, in my view, to preempt the BJP's criticism by distancing the party from what was...
You're very charitable in the circumstances, but let me quote you what Ghulam Nabi Azad said.
He said there's only one Bhagat Singh.
Well, he said Bhagat Singh एक ही थे, किसी से उनकी तुलना नहीं हो सकती और आजकल के किसी लड़के के साथ नहीं. And now let me quote you what Manish Tiwari said. There has only been one Bhagat Singh. There is only one Bhagat Singh.
Correct.
And I ask you a simple question. Did either of these gentlemen check with you for clarification, for verification, or for explanation before they issued these statements?
No, I think they were just preempting the political exploitation of this issue.
But they didn't check with you. But they didn't check with you.
They didn't check with me because they're obviously confronted by the media when they didn't know about this. This is what often happens to us, Karan. Your confrere in the media.
But something else.
Nabba saying, somebody said something, what is your reaction?
It's easy to blame my confrere in the media, but the truth is your colleagues jumped the gun. They didn't check with you, which they should have. Instead, without knowing what you'd said, how you'd said it, and how it had been received, they issued clarifications, disclaimers, and distanced the party from what you had said. That, surely, was a courtesy they owed you first.
Well, that we can talk about that separately, but I will say that my party and the NSUI, the party's student wing, which had invited me, have tweeted the full text of my speech, the full video of my speech on YouTube, and invited people to hear it for themselves.
I was
talking about all the people against whom the sedition charge had been applied by the British. An audience
all of that I know.
Bhagat Singh, and I made this.
All of that I know, and all of that Mr. Ghulam Nabi Azad could have found out, Mr. Tiwari could have found out, and the point I'm making is that both jumped the gun to distance themselves from you, in some sense to admonish you without checking with you. And that I find surprising, because you're not just a fellow MP, you're not just a former minister for HRD and a very intelligent man, but in addition, you're a colleague, and this was a courtesy they owed you.
Well, look, I'm not looking very chastened, am I, Karan? I think that They did what they did for sound, defensible party reasons in a hothouse political
Intimidated
atmosphere.
by the BJP into doing it.
No, I think preempting the BJP. And of course, the BJP did exactly as we anticipated and exploited the issue to the hilt. I think at some point they're going to have to wake up and realize the country has more serious issues on which they need to demonstrate a more credible track record than exploiting throwaway asides at student gatherings.
Shashi Tharoor, let's leave it there. A pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Karan. All the best.